What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Nintendo Land, and we are once again talking about Sonic Frontiers. And today we are doing a complete boss ranking from all the Titans and all the Guardians in total, which gives us a total of 22 different boss fights. But we took some of the clones from some of the bosses and combined them together for only 17, because there's like different forms of ninja and different forms of tower, so we put them all together because there's just upgraded versions of those bosses. But today we have 17 bosses that we are going to rank for you guys today, so if you're excited about Sonic Frontiers boss ranking, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Sonic and other Nintendo games, because occasionally we do Sonic now, I guess. But thank you for tuning in. Let's jump into the video. Coming in at number 17 and starting this list is Shark. I absolutely despise Shark. At first I thought it was pretty cool. You look for this shark robot in the sand and it jumps out, allowing you to grab his tail in this cool little cinematic. But once you start moving, that's when things get weird. You have to go through multiple phases of just moving left, right, up, and down, and it's not too bad until you start to get to the end, where I feel like it's more of a mistake of the boss battle than anything else. There's some situations where you actually have to hold left before the left prompt even comes up, because a certain missile will be in a spot that just hits you every single time, and I think it's because it's using the overworld as its battlefield, so sometimes the missiles get cramped beside different types of pillars and, you know, actual structures within the overworld, so you have to actually put in the prompts before they even pop up on screen, which took me a while to figure out, which I just don't feel like was actually the plan for how this was supposed to go. And then eventually he'll pop out of the sand, allowing you to attack it and then dive right back into the sand to repeat the process. It's really not that fun, it's just a big cinematic and it lasts way too long. Next up we have Squid, which was only slightly better, but it suffered from the same problem as Shark. It just felt like the boss battle wasn't well thought out, and lots of the, ways that they attack you just feel unfair. It feels like you're getting cheated. So you run through this strip, right, and you're just running the chase after Squid as he shoots different beams at you. But my first problem was I realized it was taking forever to reach him, like forever, like literally 4 or 5 minutes. And I thought just I wasn't fast enough or something, but no, that's just how this boss works. You have to just keep dashing until eventually you catch up. And as you get closer, he'll start shooting these little orbs at you as it's spinning and doing loops, and you can't see which lane the orbs are in, so you're left to guess, and a couple hits, you're out of rings and you're gonna die. It just kind of feels unfair. The camera pans down sometimes, so you can't see what's in front of you. You can't see when he's shooting orbs at you. You just kind of gotta guess and get lucky, which I'm not a big fan of. The bosses takes way too long to get to, and when you finally get to them, you just kind of have a regular fight when they're up against a cliff. It's nothing special. The end was such a letdown. I was like, man, I'm Super Sonic. I get to fight with a robot piloted by Sage. Like, this is gonna be climactic. This is gonna be awesome. But instead, you're just shooting a moon in an arcade fashion that you've done at least 5 times through the game already. I just don't think this is fun. It's just shooting black and white orbs at you, and you just switch back and forth. You won't even take damage if you're the right color. It's not really difficult. I don't remember really dying really that much at all. I think I lost like 1 ship maybe, but it just didn't feel like Frontiers. Frontiers was about a spectacle of boss battles. It was about flying around as Super Sonic and really controlling him for the first time ever. But this time, you're just sitting here shooting a moon, and once again, it lasts forever. There's special segments where I guess they want the music to play out more, and you're shooting the moon thing and it just doesn't break. It's just not even doing damage. It's just like you're just there to ride out this roller coaster, and you're just spamming shots in an old arcade fashion, and I just wasn't a big fan. I thought this was a letdown. I felt like they just kind of ran out of development time and they just threw this in at the last second. I was like, you know what, this could be a cool final boss for people that played on hard difficulty. I don't know. This was kind of weak to me. Number 14, we have one of the very first bosses you fight, which is Ninja. There's also 2 different variants. You have Shinobi and Master Ninja. Now, all of these are pretty basic. I don't even think the hardest version is that bad. It just feels cool to 1v1 a robot, though. It's just like you and a robot cyborg thing kind of fighting with each other. And there's just occasional things that he'll toss at you and stuff that you can counter, and then try to slash at you after disappearing after a while and then reappearing on top of you. It's just like fighting a robot ninja. It's a lot of fun. I don't have much to say about it. Once again, it's not that hard. Just doing some quick dodging and just holding the incredibly easy counter button in this game, and you'll be good to go. But I thought it wasn't terrible, and it was a decent boss fight. Tower is another one of the first bosses you fight, and you also fight its different brothers, the Excavator, Red Pillar, and Silver Hammer. And they're just different versions than the harder versions. Some of them fly around, some of them have bigger pillars that you have to break, and some of them require lots of spin dashes and side loops in order to get through, which I really love the dodge system with these different pillar spike things that shoots at you, because you can dodge one and immediately attack its base, which feels really smart smooth. I love the feel of this, and there's also many ways to take this on. You can just make your way to the top and come down from the top with circle, which will bring you down with a kick, and you can start attacking its head right away without even breaking the pieces off, which I love the different options that you have to take this thing down, and it felt like a really good first boss that you found in the game. Next up, we have the first version of the final boss, Supreme, which was another big letdown. This was the fourth and final Titan you fought, and it just didn't feel original like the others did. This kind of just felt like another big robot in the battlefield that you just kind of ran up on and fought. So it has like these little shield things that shoots little yellow crystals at you around him. You can't even attack him. You have to attack those things, and you can't just punch them because for some reason it will like lock back onto the main robot after you punch it once. So you have to do like a special attack on them, which is very confusing and awkward. I can't really explain it. A lot of people will probably know if you played this boss the first time. It took me a while to figure that out, but you have to use a special attack on the little pieces and then attack him and go into a barrage of counters, and then you can start attacking him. Normally you get a special move on each boss when you hit a specific counter, like you'll throw him or do something really cool. This time you'll just do the basic attack that he did on Giganto in the very beginning, where you just kind of spin dash into him and then do this kick thing with all the copies of Sonic kicks him. I don't understand. It just didn't feel original. It didn't feel unique. And then Supreme will take to the air and start flying around with more drones around him and sending out crystals everywhere. It just looks hectic. It's not that bad. It's just kind of the same fight with the same moves, and there's not many cinematic cool moments in this fight either. One of the main things about Supreme is that he wields a gun and only uses it for one shot during the entire battle, and it's a quick little quick time event, and then you're moving forward and fighting him again. And at the very end, there's no special ending of fighting him or blowing him up, and I understand you want to keep him alive because Sage needs to pilot it, but that's really about it. He just kind of stands still and just goes down, like powers down. There's nothing else. This boss was bad. I'm sorry. On Ares Isle, we have Tank, which is actually pretty unique. It twists up this giant snowstorm and shoots you up into the sky, and you'll go spinning around the tank, which you can do a homing attack, but you have to be careful when you use it to not hit the flames that are around him. Once you get the timing down, you'll know exactly when a homing attack and can go in between each kind of flare it shoots out, which is really cool, and then you can drop it to the ground in order to attack it there, which is awesome. Strider can be a very, very annoying boss battle, but its grand spectacle kind of makes up for it. It shoots out all these rings in order for you to fly up, but I think the animation is just so goofy the way it works. You kind of just go around these rings and it just flips you to the next one, and all you really essentially are doing is holding RT. So it's funny, but it's still really cool. You have to get through these 3 giant loops in the middle by just kind of going around each one and painting it with like this blue kind of tint. This will allow you to get to the center console and just start wailing on the thing, and then it will repeat once again. And round 2 is no joke. You'll have all these different types of beams and just different attacks flying at you on the rails. One that goes the opposite direction, one that follows you, one that switches lanes, one that's just a giant laser that just hits every lane. I mean, there's so many things happening, it's almost impossible to always dodge them. And if you want to jump and turn around, it's just a very awkward movement to kind of get Sonic to flip around on the rails. I wish you could just push the other direction and he would turn around. And I think because of that, it makes this very difficult in order to stay on the rails half the time, because you have to jump in certain situations instead of just switching. Fortress is absolutely massive, and it's a better way to use its grind rails compared to the previous boss on this list. So with this one, you kind of just chase this giant massive fortress as it's flying through the air dropping bombs until it starts deploying its rails. And you want to ride its rails all the way until you eventually reach it, and it doesn't take too long, and you don't have to worry about holding down the dash all the time because it refills if you stay on the blue rails the entire time. It's like a really cool rail switching mini game, and I actually really like it. There's some sections where there's bombs and different gaps in the rails that you'll have to dodge, and it really makes you have to pay attention before you even reach it, which is still really fine. And then eventually when you reach it, you'll just have a regular battle where you're just kind of wailing on the main boss itself, but I still found this one to be very interesting. Next up, we have Ghost, which was just a weird one, but I love it. It had like this weird, strange music, but it was like one of the most catchy battle themes in the entire game. Honestly, I love the soundtrack, but fighting this boss was different than the rest. You had to actually side loop around these pillars, and it would move to the next one, putting you through many different obstacle courses as it was firing at you. So it took what you learned throughout the entire game and had you actually use them during different obstacle courses, you know, attacking enemies, making your way through different areas, and you had to keep chasing this thing down, side looping around the pillars, which was definitely a different take for a boss, and I loved it. It was something new, it was unique, and I felt like it worked with great music, and it just had like a big scenic presence. Next up, we have yet again another rail grinding one, but this one just felt really unique too. This one is Caterpillar, and I don't know why it's called Caterpillar. If anything, it reminds me of like a beetle or something. But you go along these rails and you have to collect these orbs, and each little round will add more orbs, including some yellow ones that you have to fly up to in order to reach, which is really cool as well. Eventually it'll try to make a run for it, and you have to chase it down and start attacking its backside as it's firing massive amounts of lasers and different bombs at you, which is really cool as well because you can't just keep randomly attacking it. You have to be careful. It's still attacking you. You're in a completely new phase now. I know this part is kind of talking more about the environment than the boss, but you fight one in this cave area, which is just extremely cool. But there's also a unique way to actually spin around him and knock him over. I think a lot of the bosses have unique ways to attack him. I haven't figured them all out, but this one you get to do a side loop around him, knock him over, and start attacking its underside, which is easier to take out, and you don't have to worry about it firing at you, which is such a cool little thing that you can find. So next up we have Asura. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing this one correct, but Asura is actually really cool. And because it's a giant, huge guardian, which is actually kind of like a titan if you think about it. You get to climb up the side of its arms and attack the pillars on top of its head, and it's really one of the only kind of bosses like this of its kind that's not a giant titan, which I really loved, and I wanted to see more of this, more climbing up giant bosses like this. And it's one of the very first bosses that you'll see in your adventure, and of course we've seen this one tons of times in the demos, so yeah, this is just a great boss though. You actually get to spin around its feet in order to get another portal gear, which is really cool, and it's not even needed. It's just like, why? But it's just something that's really cool added into the boss, and once again, I'm sure lots of the other bosses have mechanics and things like this. We just have to go find them all, but this is just really cool. Sumo is not difficult by any means, but it's a really different boss battle. It puts you in this kind of electric field arena where you can't attack it head on. You have to side loop around it in order to like bloat it up and then bounce it off the walls, which is really cool. And your job is to bounce it into the purple lasers in the cage, which will electrify it, allowing you to hit it. Now, what's cool about this is you don't have to just bounce him into the different electric wires. You can actually jump into them yourself and just ram into him with Sonic, which is something definitely unique, and it adds something new to the gameplay. And the more bounces you get off of the ring, the harder you'll slam into the robot, which is really cool, and you can plan some really cool kind of bounce plays in order to slam him into the right position. Or you can just side loop around him and just fling him himself, but this is a lot cooler in my opinion. Look, Spider is cool as heck, and is seriously one of my favorite guardians in the entire game. This is so unique. You have to kind of side loop around each one of its legs, whether you take it slow or use the quick one, and when you run out, you just kind of got to run around and dodge all of its legs trying to stab you while kind of lifting them up with the side loop, which is really cool. And once you get all four, eventually you can attack the head, which will fling Sonic up into the air miles above. And now you will go into a free fall gliding down section, which is so cool. You get to fly down from super high up and see the entire island, but your job is to fly through the cyan rings and shoot energy beams down at him on the ground, which will break pieces away at him. You just can't see it because you're too high up right now, but eventually making your way all the way down to finish him off and break him apart, which he'll try to scamper away, and you can continue to attack while he's trying to run. This is just such a good boss battle with tons of unique parts, and they really did a lot of work to make this feel very unique from other boss battles in the game. Now down to the final three, and of course these are going to be the Titans. And the first one I have at number 3 is Giganto. Giganto is the first Titan you find, and it's a really cool Titan how they kind of introduce him. You go to fight him and realize Sonic is not strong enough. He punches Sonic, and you have to find the Chaos Emeralds, and he's like, where's the last one? And boom, it's on top of his head. So you have to actually climb its leg and its arm in order to get to its head, and then you become Super Sonic, which is super cool. And you battle this thing just wailing on him as Super Sonic with your normal attacks, but they're now all supercharged, and it just feels really good. You can counter and do this little homing attack thing, which isn't unique to the boss, because once again we've seen it again at the very end with Supreme, but it's really cool because it's the first time you get to do something like this, and the whole battle just feels very intense. And then eventually he'll shoot lasers out of his back, which just makes him a little stronger, and you have to react a lot faster. My only problem with this boss ended up being I didn't have enough rings to jump into the battle, and it doesn't give you any rings during the battle unlike some of the other bosses, so I felt kind of weird, like you had to go into the boss with a specific amount of rings or you don't have a chance. But other than that, it was so much fun. It was a climactic first boss battle for the first island, and I loved what I played. Now these next two bosses were the peak of Sonic Frontiers, and it really was a tough one to choose who was the best. But at number 2 we have Knight. Knight really gave me a Sonic and the Black Knight type of vibes as you're fighting this giant robot that's just rolling around the stage with a giant sword. Now to get on top of it, you have to parry some things and then climb up its sword and then climb up its long arms, and in the same way you kind of did Giganto to reach the top of his head. Unlike Supreme, he actually uses his weapons. He uses his sword and shield constantly, defending himself and trying to attack Sonic with it, which you'll have to parry the sword and dodge out of the way of the shield in order to swing at his head. There are tons of fun quick time events where he'll throw the shield at you and Sonic has to catch it and then starts riding it toward him, even though the rockets coming in look like they just took a whole bunch of PNGs of rockets and just threw them on the screen. Look at the way they're coming in. But unlike the other bosses in the game, this is one of the 2 bosses that has a special quick time event, or really a special parry event, where he'll kind of just homing attack and knock them all down, lift them up in the air, and then kick them straight down to the ground, which is a unique animation specific for this boss, which I love. There's also a moment where he'll throw his shield Captain America style, and you'll have to parry it in order to catch it, line up your shot, and throw the shield back at his head in order to paralyze him, which is just brilliant. And then finally, the final scene, Sonic goes full Black Knight and catches the sword and uses it himself to slice Knight in half, which is a beautiful end to a beautiful boss battle. Not to mention the music here is just beautiful. And the best boss in Sonic Frontiers is Wyvern. Wyvern is the only Titan that's flying in the air the entire time. It's like a giant snake, serpent, dragon that's just flying around with giant claws. And I just love everything about this boss, from the build up to the actual fight itself and to the cinematics of the fight, and even the music when you're playing. It's just all amazing. So first off, you have to make your way up one of the towers in order to get on top of his head. You'll ride it, and then eventually it will create a path very similar to Squid that you'll have to run on and chase it down, which is very unique. You have to do all types of little platforming challenges and extra things to make sure you don't fall and make sure you catch your way back up to his head again in order to get that last Chaos Emerald. It just makes it feel like it was a lot of work to finally get that last Chaos Emerald, and it pays off so well. You then get to hear the music start up as you turn into Super Sonic, and you're flying through the air with this boss as you can see the entire map from above, and you get to even fly through parts of the map that you've already experienced, which is just insane. You get to collect rings as well, which means you will never really run out of rings if you just know what you're doing, and you have to parry giant tail attacks and hand attacks that'll try to swipe you in order to start the combat. This boss also has a very special counter move. When you counter the tail wipe, you actually get to pick his tail up, fling him around, and slam him into a nearby cliff, Mario 64 style, and it's amazing. And in phase 2, it'll shoot out tons of beams and rockets that you'll actually have to dodge instead of just flying beside it, which just gives it this cinematic feel. You're actually playing as Super Sonic, flying through the air, fighting this giant flying contraption, and you'll have to counter like crazy. Sometimes it'll do a double swing or even a triple swing, and you'll have to keep being ready. It's like one of the first times I actually felt the counter needed to be timed pretty well. And I know some people don't like QuickTime events and all you have to do is press a certain button at the right time, but there's some of the most unique ones I've ever seen. He gathers all these rockets around and just kicks it straight into its body, which is just such a unique animation. And at the end, Wyvern will fly into the sky to kind of bombard Sonic, and Sonic catches him, slows him down, and also guides the rockets that are shot at him all the way back around and into his mouth after opening up and prying it open, which is just insane. This was definitely my favorite boss battle throughout the entire game, and it just showed that Sonic Frontiers had some extremely high highs, but also some very low lows. And it was definitely a mixture, but this is definitely my list of all the bosses ranked. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with this list, and what you would change about it, and what was your favorite or least favorite boss in the game. How'd you feel about Supreme in the end being the final boss? Were you also very upset the way I was? I just wanted to see something in the same vein as Wyvern and Knight, as they were the second and third bosses of the game. I really thought the final boss was going to be something chaotic. But let me know what you think, and thank you so much for tuning in, and like always, I'll see you all on the next one. See ya, guys.